News now. Asian markets rallied this morning with oil and high-yielding currencies picking up gains as well, with investors growing increasingly confident that China and the United States will eventually hammer out a deal to end their long-running trade war. While talks ended on Friday in Beijing with no deal, negotiators shift to Washington this week, with US President Donald Trump saying discussions were going extremely well and suggesting that he could extend a March 1st truce deadline for an agreement to be reached. All green across the day's trade, with Tokyo's Nikkei up by 1.8% to 21,281 points. The Hang Seng was up by a similar margin, rising to 28,347 points. It was an even better day in Shanghai, with the composite moving 2.7% to the good, moving to 2,754 points. Wall Street rallied on Friday, with the Dow and the Nasdaq posting their 8th consecutive weekly gains as investors grew hopeful that the US and China would hammer out that agreement, resolving their protracted trade war. The Dow Jones Industrial stamped its authority, rising 1.75% to 25,883 points. The S&P 500 picked up over 1% to close out at 2,775 points, while the Nasdaq Composite was almost 2/3% to the good, climbing to 7,472 points. For more on the markets, we cross to Arabile Gumede at the JSE. A mixed picture behind you, Arabile. What's happening in the markets?
Yeah, it's a pretty green mixture if you were to take a look at the market today. 2/3% to the good as well. Thus far, a lot of the counters as well doing fairly good. The likes of the resources up 0.75%, financials as well around 0.25%. The gold counters themselves seemingly doing very, very well after the recent battering, perhaps oversold somewhat on the continued bad news coming out of those trading updates and those earnings. We still have the likes of Sibanye, Stillwater, which of course aren't just a gold producer anymore, but seriously looking firmly into that platinum space as well. Speaking about platinum, of course, the numbers out of Anglo Platinum itself coming out earlier today, much better than expected. A very good set of numbers on that front, and we'll discuss that now, and we'll analyze some of those earnings, and then we'll get to chat to the CEO around 2 o'clock as well, just about what he thought of the earnings and how he managed to bring the company to this, perhaps as a much leaner and meaner machine, if you want to call it that. On the international front, things are looking good as well. A sense of green coming to the markets, so clearly we're following that sentiment. Let's unpack those numbers exactly, particularly out in Europe, and we'll come back and analyze how the market's gone. Well, coming back to that market picture, as I've noted, quite green across the board, right? If you just look behind me as well, there's probably only one sentiment there where it feels a little bit red on that front for today's trade. Gary Booysen from Rand Swiss joining us in studios. We unpack that market picture. Gary, thank you so much for the time. 2/3% to the good for the JSE All Share, perhaps following the sentiment out of the United States last Friday and Asia as well today. So we're perhaps getting a sense of that positivity.
Well, certainly, I think we're getting risk off, especially after Donald Trump tweeted over the weekend that we're getting a little bit of progress on the trade talks. He says that he's so positive around what's happening. So that helping to lift Asia this morning. Asia was up more than 3%. I believe it's up to a 10-week high now at the moment. So we're really seeing a big recovery, especially in China. Europe started positive. It's drifted a little bit. I think that's maybe because the US is going to be closed tonight for President's Day. But overall, yeah, welcome positivity.
Yeah. On the whole, we, gotten a set of results coming through from last week, even trading updates and the like as well. We go through onto today as well. Then the big news of Anglo American Platinum comes to the fore, and they have a stellar set of earnings to release. How well does that bode for the mining sector, and particularly the PGM space?
I don't know how well it bodes for the mining sector in general, because Amplats has been, it's really been on a process of restructuring the whole business over the last couple of years. So they've been selling off a lot of the non-core assets, and they've really been focusing on the key profitable assets. So if you actually look at their production numbers were down about 6%. And part of this is because of the rebuild at a couple of their smelters. But while the actual volumes of produced platinum were down, it was really the platinum price, and especially the palladium price, that's helped to boost earnings, and also just very, very solid cost control. So it's Amplats running the business very well, although not necessarily producing more actual platinum.
Yeah.
So
It bodes them in good stead, though, on the long term, right? Because that was the sentiment, that they had just too many assets that weren't producing enough, and they were, leaning on these big, old sort of assets that perhaps weren't helping them in the long run. So now they're a much leaner, a much meaner machine, one that is getting the necessary out. So they're becoming more efficient and more essential. Is that not what the sector as a whole needs to look for?
I think that's exactly what you're looking for in a business. That's why businesses run so efficiently, because a business can look at their underlying operating assets, and they're trying to maximize profitability. So they can look at it and say, where does it make sense for us to mine, and then go and mine there. And Mogalakwena, is absolutely enormous in the context of the overall group. So overall group generated, it was 5.6 billion free cash flow, whereas Mogalakwena generated 4 billion's worth of free cash flow. Now this is a huge, highly mechanized mine. It's an amazing asset that they get to mine. And Amplats, with the restructuring, has become far more shareholder friendly. So suddenly you're seeing, in mining companies, you get what's called operating leverage. So essentially, if you see a little bit of a tick up in the basket, now we know platinum's been very much under pressure. But the palladium price has moved up. So if you look at the PGMs, which is the platinum group metals, they were up 13% in US dollar terms last year. Now, that just turns into operating leverage for Amplats, and that tick up just results in enormous, a return for shareholders. Now, Amplats is obviously, and this was the big surprise today, and I think what everyone is so excited about. While the earnings were actually in line with guidance, we had a trading statement, so there hasn't been too much move in the share price. It's the dividend policy has changed. So they had a policy of paying out 30% of earnings. They've moved that up to 40% of earnings, because they're just generating so much cash at the moment. They feel they can return that cash to investors, which is exactly what you want as a
Questions
shareholder.
a lot of that will be on is now to the unions. They see something like that, and they'll start asking the questions, what about us? And I suppose that's an argument we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. But another company to make firm headlines, and continues to do so, MTN, their struggles just proving firm, all the way from Iran, now former South African SA ambassador as well, nabbed for perhaps changing those Turkcell contracts as well. It was with Turkcell, now given to MTN, perhaps bribes paid. This just does not sit well for MTN, and this keeps scoring own goals.
The Turkcell MTN, I suppose, issue has been around for many years. It's going on it must be over a decade now almost, that this kind of battle backwards and forth has been going on, whether there were bribes paid, what kind of corruption, and it was all around the issuing of the Turkcell license in Iran. And now, if you look at Iran is an especially important territory for MTN. I think there's about 44.5 million subscribers that come from Iran. It's their second biggest market. So this is a very important market for MTN. But at the same time, we've been through the legal process on this court battle already. And it's already been, in our minds, resolved. Now we saw on Friday the arresting of the South African ambassador. And it's just, again, it's the quantum that is so difficult, because Turkcell is suing MTN for north of $4 billion. But the graph, the bribery charges underneath, was that a former MTN employee had given the South African ambassador 1.4 million. Now, 1.4 million rand compared to billions of dollars. It's just so out of proportion. It just seems crazy. They obviously, the ruling in the previous case was saying that the ambassador, this was a private matter, it was with an MTN employee, but it had nothing to do with MTN as a group in total. But as far as we were concerned, this was resolved. So a little bit surprising to see this coming out, but market to an extent discounting. So MTN slightly down on the day, but I think just so much bad news already priced into MTN at this stage.
And we know that it's a good business. It's just all the set of news perhaps just keeps hurting it, right? And just keeps coming to the fore.
Absolutely. And it's the same. Operationally, I think MTN is very, very solid. And it's really that you're getting now a large discount in MTN share price based on the geographies they're operating in. We've seen it, in Iran, it used to formerly be around, now back around in the headlines. Nigeria, Uganda, gone. It doesn't matter where they seem to operate. It seems like there's always issues just about the way that they operate. And it is concerning. But again, the share price is trading at a discount because of it. So potential value, we see that they're going to have earnings out next month. And I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised at what the business is doing from an operating standpoint. But again, as you say, it's the negative news headlines that's affecting the share price.
We'll certainly be keen to check out that one as well. Just very quickly before we close off, of course, Sibanye Stillwater as well, of keen interest. They've had a struggle with regards to some of their not just results but deals that have come to the fore, a few deaths and issues as well at their mines and whatnot. What would you make of that business? Do you feel that there's room there? Is it one that you'd invest in?
It's one that we trade actively. So looking at Sibanye, I've always liked the idea of Sibanye, and I think Neil Frodeman is a fantastic leader of that business. I think he's done very positive things for the gold and platinum mining industry. We were a little bit concerned around the transaction that they did with Stillwater, just the size of the transaction. It was very much a bet that we were going to see a recovery in platinum group metal prices, and without it, it was going to take a long time, and that was a big transaction to swallow. But at the same time, we've seen PGM prices tick up. It looks like they're going to pay that down in about 2 years now, which puts the group on a much more stable footing. We're starting to see the share price appreciate, and now we've obviously got the a lot of ructions around just negotiations between Sibanye Stillwater and the unions, and Sibanye is saying that they're probably going to lay off north of 6,000 people. They're instituting formal processes around that. But again, I mean, this is affecting kind of the Driefontein and Beatrix mines, and Stillwater saying almost what Amplats is saying. We have very profitable mines, and we're not going to cross-subsidize these mines at the expense of the overall business. And if we have to close these mines, if we have to put shafts on care and maintenance, we will do it, because you can't put the rest of our good business at risk because of a couple of poorly performing assets.
CEO's got some hard decisions to make on that front, and perhaps that Stillwater deal might actually hang in the balance, and it might not be Stillwater's any longer on that front. Gary Booysen from Rand was joining us, unpacking that market picture as well. We have